The world's largest biodiversity conference in a decade is underway in southern China. Kunming is hosting the United Nations COP15 conference. It's the first of two major gatherings that aims to reverse the loss of the Earth's plants and animals. CGTN's Tian Wei is there with more.
Once a polluted lake, it is now a showcase of the strong determination to protect the environment. Strolling along the Dianchi Lake in the city of Kunming, one could hardly imagine 10 years ago the lake water was green and stinking. But these pictures do speak for themselves. That change has been taken note by delegates attending the ongoing COP15 or UN Biodiversity Conference. They need inspirational case studies like that of the Dianchi Lake to rally the world and encourage confidence in reversing the trend of biodiversity loss.
We need best practice sharing for sure, and we need science, and we need all kinds of innovations that not only supported by the government agencies, but also by involvement of all communities, including business, including education researchers, and including the private companies, so we can come together as a global communities, so we can really share a future for all life on Earth.
Since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, humans have viewed nature as a source to extract raw materials, energy, minerals, timber, you name it. In the last 50 years, though, wildlife populations have on average declined by 60%. Around 1 million animal and plant species, almost a quarter of the global total, are threatened with extinction. There were earlier attempts to solve the growing problem, but the deadline for goals set earlier were hardly met. So the 5-day meeting is to set the stage again for a new global framework to reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. The draft of the proposed new framework lists 21 targets for urgent actions. The main proposals protect at least 30% of land and of sea areas globally, and increase funding to at least $200 billion per year on that. Now, delegates from all over the world are presenting their views at the ongoing COP15. What they realized together is, even though there were progress being made earlier, there's no breakthrough. What they need now is both being ambitious and inclusive in setting the goals, and even more importantly, actions and results. Tian Wei, CGTN, Kunming.
And on the second day of this conference, Chinese President Xi Jinping is among those expected to speak via video. So for more, let's get over to Tao Yuan live for us in Kunming. So what can we expect today, Tao Yuan?
So, Jonathan, earlier this morning, delegates to the COP15 conference were actually taken on quite a special excursion, because we know that southwest China's Yunnan province is known as the kingdom for plants and animals. And this morning they were taken to a greenhouse group actually here at the provincial capital, Kunming. It's called Fuli Gong. And earlier I actually visited the greenhouse as well. And I have to say, I think we can all agree that compared with animals, plants have always been the overlooked one in the flora and fauna pair, and this greenhouse actually made me realize what an exciting world the plants live in. So let's take a look.
Fuli Gong means lychee palace in English. That was the name of the world's very first greenhouse on record.
2,000 years ago, during the Han Dynasty, China's Emperor Wu had the Fuli Gong Palace built in his royal garden up in the north in order to cultivate tropical plants. So the name of the modern-day Fuli Gong was actually borrowed from that story. And I was told that there are more than 2,500 species of plants in here.
Fuli Gong's main greenhouse is split roughly into two zones, a desert and a tropical rainforest.
This is a rather typical scene in the rainforest. What you're seeing now is a killer fig strangling an oil palm to a slow and painful death. You see, the life of this fig tree actually started from a little seedling on the surface of another tree.
Its roots grow downward to the ground. That's when it's able to absorb all the nutrients in the soil and starts to grow really fast.
The roots then form this lattice around the host.
The fig's crown blocks the sunlight as its roots steal the nutrients. Unable to grow, the oil palm eventually dies and rots away. This is the greenhouse for carnivorous plants, plants that eat meat.
This is a Venus flytrap. It's got 3 tiny hairs on each of its leaves, and if you trigger any 2 of them within 20 seconds, then here's what's going to happen. Now, imagine if this was a fly. So plants like this actually make you think, don't they, about how intelligent they really are. Yes, they don't have nerve cells or a centralized brain like we do, but they certainly do take in information and strategize in striking ways. So perhaps they deserve more credit and attention from us. In a way, we are who we are today because of plants. Our ancestors stood upright because of plants. They started using fire not to roast meat, but to break down the chemical toxins in plants. There's one lingering question on my mind though. Why do we still need to study and understand them today? And I got my answer from a renowned botanist.
如果袁隆平没有海南岛的一个那个小草，就野生的。
If Yuan Longping, the famed father of hybrid rice, never found the stretch of wild rice on Hainan Island, he wouldn't have been able to develop the high-yielding hybrid strain. If Tu Youyou never came across an inconspicuous plant called the sweet wormwood, she would never have found a cure for malaria. So you tell me what happens if we lost plant diversity.
And Jonathan, as you say, so the Chinese President Xi Jinping is going to make a keynote speech this afternoon via video link during the Leaders Summit. So all eyes are going to be on that because we know that since the president took office, he's put climate and the environment at the forefront of his governing policies, rolling out a series of measures to tackle climate change, the degradation of environment, as well as the loss of biodiversity. So as I say, all eyes are going to be on his speech this afternoon to see how that's going to impact global decision making, especially when the loss of biodiversity is posing a serious threat to human well-being now. And as my colleague Tian Wei just said in the earlier report, decision making alone is not going to help. What we need right now is implementation and action. Jonathan?
All right, Tao, you've been live for us in Kunming. Thank you. Well, China is considered one of the world's most ecologically diverse countries, and officials say they are making progress protecting the environment. A government report released on Friday says China has established nearly 10,000 protected areas, accounting for 18% of the country's land. China has designated 32 areas a priority to protect plants and animals, and it's created 10 national parks. 90% of the country's ecosystems and 71% of key wildlife species are under protection in China. The country's wild animal populations have also grown in the past 40 years. The number of giant pandas has increased from 1,100 to more than 1,800. Asian elephants have grown from 180 to 300. Now, since the year 2000, China was the biggest contributor to green growth, accounting for a quarter of the world's total. This report also says the country is responsible for 10% of the world's new plant varieties in the past decade, with 200 varieties each year. Okay, well, let's talk about this now with Professor Ahimsa Kamsos Arkis. He's an investigator at the Southeast Asia Biodiversity Research Institute and Center for Integrative Conservation under the Chinese Academy of Sciences. He's joining us live in Xishuangbanna in Yunnan Province. Professor, it's good to have you with us on the show. So you just heard all the highlights there of China's conservation efforts. How would you assess the work done so far?
Hello, Jonathan. Good to be here. Well, I think as you have done a very good summary of what is happening, and I think what is important is that China acknowledges the importance of biodiversity, of ecosystem function, and ecosystem services, and it's creating national policies that have into account biodiversity, and it integrates into, mainstream into other policies. I think in that sense, that's a very positive trend. And as you were saying, what we can see is that as a consequence, We're having an expansion of protected areas, all these new national parks being established. We're seeing a recovery of many threatened species, including some very charismatic species. And I think very important to highlight, we're seeing a very clear increase in interest by the general public. So I think Chinese people have become very aware of the importance of conservation, and I think people are committed and interested. As we saw with the elephants that walked to Kunming a few months ago, you could see how people were highly interested in that phenomenon, and they were following it with great interest.
So when you look at China, I mean, pollution obviously a concern here, but it's done a lot to try to protect the environment. How critical is its role when it comes to protecting biodiversity?
Well, it's very important. I think China seems to be very committed to adopt a leadership role, both regionally and globally. And we need that kind of commitment from China and from other countries, but I think China's commitment is particularly important. And I think China is able to influence as the influence is expanding globally, for example, with development projects like the Belt and Road Initiative. I think it's important that we integrate conservation into these development processes. I think we need to keep in mind that as we do development, there will be trade-offs, there will be losses in conservation, but we need to do it in a way that we minimize these losses and we get gains wherever it's possible. I think it's important to understand that where I work, for example, I work in the Southeast Asia Biodiversity Research Institute. We are playing a very key role in Southeast Asia in terms of developing conservation science, inventorying biodiversity, training people in the region, and also helping to develop conservation policies. So I think all these things, China is very well placed to do this, and it will play a big role. But as you were saying, there are also some critical things and some negative aspects. So China has a big ecological footprint that we need to think about how to reduce as the country continues to develop in the coming decades.
So this COP15 gathering underway here in southern China ahead of a larger COP gathering in Scotland later this year. So what are your expectations for this meeting?
It has been a long way to come here, right? Due to the pandemic, we had a postponement. It's really exciting to see it happening already. So I think what we want to expect for this week is basically that everything goes according to plan, that the Kunming Declaration is approved and it is accepted by the signatory countries. This declaration is very comprehensive, and I think it is very well thought and well balanced. And then next year, as you know, in spring, there will be the second part of the COP15, where the post-2020 global biodiversity framework will be agreed and will be signed. So I think it's very important that these targets are in track what we have right now with the current draft, because they're very important targets. And I'm personally very interested in a few elements. I'm very excited to see that for the first time we're including human-wildlife interactions as one of the targets in the framework. Also, I am very interested to see the key role that financing is playing. There's a lot of emphasis on having resources for the implementation, because in the past we were very good at planning but not so good at implementing. And I think this is somewhere where China can set again leadership, because China is really good at implementing. So in having a plan, having a framework, not only that looks good on paper, but can be really implemented in reality.
Okay, we'll see what comes out of these meetings. Professor Amhika Campos-Arquís, live for us from Xishuangbanna. Thank you. Well, scientists say it will take likely decades for the wildlife to recover from Australia's unprecedented bushfires. More than 3 billion animals died. Several species are now threatened, but one conservation group is enlisting creative minds to help, as Greg Navarro explains in Sydney.
Scientists will tell you that catching koalas isn't fun.
Koalas don't like it, and koala researchers don't like it. It's hard work.
But tagging these iconic animals is necessary to better understand their movements and help preserve the species. It's believed tens of thousands of koalas along Australia's east died in the 2019-2020 bushfires.
We were thinking how great would it be if we had a system to actually find them when we needed them to be found, and especially, you know, before a fire to rescue them, or post-fire to see whether they're coping okay.
The solution that University of Sunshine Coast research fellow Roman Christescu came up with is an ear tag that allows researchers to track koalas over greater distances. More importantly, these tags are powered by the sun instead of tiny batteries that need to be changed often.
So what we're hoping with that invention of a solar panel one is that the koala is fitted once, and hopefully that is for its lifetime.
The VHF solar ear tag is just one of several creative solutions funded through an innovation challenge created by Worldwide Fund for Nature Australia.
You start to fall into that trap of just doing the things that we've always done, and unfortunately in some cases, and what we've been finding here in Australia before the fires, but particularly after the fires, is those things no longer work anymore. And so we need to try and find new ways and better ways of saving our wildlife.
It may not be obvious in the area where I am right now, but it's filled with countless habitats for a variety of species. The problem for those parts of the country hit by bushfires is that the habitats are gone and their regeneration can take up to a century.
The loss of habitat has left smaller ground-dwelling animals unprotected from predators such as feral cats and foxes. That's where this unusual-looking structure comes in.
You can kind of see our little model here. This is a bandicoot about the size of an animal that would use them.
These habitat pods break down in about a year and can be placed in areas where shelter no longer exists.
It's meant to provide protection for wildlife after fires in that interim period where there's no vegetation regrowing. It takes its time to come back. So the wildlife really needs somewhere to go and hide.
The habitat pods and VHF solar ear tags move into field trials later this year.
And we've just got to become comfortable with trying things we haven't done before, things that we might think that's a bit risky.
Because conservation scientists say the biggest risk is doing nothing. Rag Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.